Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. Today our topic is pools and real estate profits.
Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast with Scott Whitwam, your blueprint to financial abundance. Settle in as we explore the mindset and methods for wealth building through real estate.
Welcome back. I'm Scott Whitwam, and I'm glad you've joined me today for pools and real estate profits. Our focus today is about value and profits for residential real estate investors. And I get asked on a regular basis, not just from retail buyers, but also from investors, how we can maximize value. We all have different objectives or reasons for why we do what we do. As investors, we not only have to know what is best for us, but we also have to know what is best for our customers or what our customers want. And then we need to consider how that works for us in our investing goals and for our potential clients. Then we get to decide on what to do or not to do to meet these investing goals. To help us better understand and make some decisions around the benefits and drawbacks of pools, I've asked the owner of ASW Pool Service to join me today. Aaron, welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
As we get started, let me get a little bit of information from you for our listeners who don't know anything about ASW Pool Service. How long have you been maintaining and in the swimming pool business?
I started ASW Pool Service back in 2017. I have a business associate who had been in the pool industry for over 20 years, and he had offered to sell me a portion of his business at that time.
So you are located here in Arizona in the Phoenix metro area. And, in our area, there are homes of all prices, all levels, with all types of pools due to our climate. I mean, obviously, the climate's here. Most of the year, people can swim, and actually, you can add a pool heater and probably swim year-round. The one issue that I think is common to ask is about homes with pools. Is it a benefit? Is it not benefit? What would be the top issues with having a home with a pool for an investor?
Yeah, let me tell you about some of the pool issues that you can run into, especially here in Arizona. There's a lot of debris that gets into pools here in the summer. A lot of landscaping around pools will have either palm trees or bougainvilleas. Bougainvilleas are really popular here in Arizona.
And we have those big sandstorms they call haboobs, that come through here often.
Yeah, and the sandstorms are going to blow a lot of debris in there. Not to mention, we actually get a lot of monsoon-like weather too. We haven't seen it as much the last couple of years, but we still get a lot of rainstorms. That's a lot of wind, a lot of rain, putting more stuff into the pool. And that's going to add more food for algae to want to grow. So in those situations, all of this is contributing to giving more chance for algae to grow in your pool. So you got to stay on top of that in those sort of conditions.
And I hear the frustration from people sometimes in that area because they're like, hey, I've got a pool guy, or they're servicing them, trying to service it themselves. And it's like, we're doing the chemicals, we're doing this stuff, and the pool's still turning green. So that seems to be a common thing with regards to pools. How do you keep it from turning green?
Yeah, staying on top of the number one thing is chlorine. A lot of pool owners know that you need chlorine in your pool, but they don't correlate that you need that chlorine in your water, not just in the chlorine floater or one of the other ways to add it into your pool. Thankfully, there's a lot of resources here in the Arizona area that you can just walk into a pool store and they'll help you out in figuring that sort of information out, where your pool actually is right now, by taking them a water sample. The water sample is going to tell you what the chlorine level is at, what that food level is at for that algae. Do you got to deal with the alkalinity? Is it a pH issue? All of these things are factors into keeping a pool from turning green, especially when we're having storms, high winds with sandstorms or anything like that.
So when you're talking with your customers, because obviously, you're servicing their pools and having a conversation with them, what are the main things that most of your customers, that may be common themes about what they love about having their swimming pools?
The number one common thing that I'll hear about people, why they love their pool, is because you can cool off in our hot weather. We hit that 120 degrees, and a lot of people don't want to swim just from how hot it is. But if you do get in the water, that's going to help you cool off really quick. And what's really nice in that 120 degrees is once you get out, you're going to dry off pretty quickly.
Low humidity, high heat, quick drying times.
Yeah, and then outside of that, you mentioned it earlier, a lot of pools, nowadays especially, have heaters. So you can enjoy that pool water all year round. I have many of my clients that actually do that. And in January, February, when the weather is finally cold here in Arizona, they're still swimming. And when you see that steam just coming off the pool, you know it's ready to go.
Well, I've noticed that on some of the homes in these newer communities that are coming up, that the pool builders seem to try to create this aesthetic in the backyard. So it's not just a hole with plaster in it filled with water. Obviously it's probably creates some more complications for maintenance and service for you, but your clients seem to have more pleasure in the fact that they have a pool now that it kind of blends in the backyard that has a swing slide or those kind of things. You hear those kind of.
Yeah, the number one addition to the backyard that I see that a lot of people enjoy are waterfalls. Like as much as the slide does have some temptation for people wanting to slide in there, I find that waterfalls, aerator, anything that's going to get the sound of running water going in their backyard, even if they can't see it. A lot of times I'll end up having to run pools in the day just in a certain hour point where they want to have their lunch and listen to the waterfall in the backyard. So the waterfall is number one. The slide definitely as well, especially if you have kids who want to be sliding in that pool quite a bit. That slide is very useful. You can hook it up to the water system so it has water constantly flowing it down. And especially on the deeper pools where you maybe even have a diving board where you can jump in on the deep end. Yeah, there's a lot of those additions outside of just having a hole in the ground that they do enjoy.
Well, let me ask you about the difference maybe between one of your homeowner clients or some of your homeowner clients and investor clients. Because, investors buying the home, whether it's for, a rental or whether it's for an Airbnb type situation for short-term rental, but the investor's not kind of concerned about, his kids being able to go on the water slide or so what do you hear in a difference between a homeowner and an investor for what they like about pools?
The difference between a homeowner and an investor really depends on what the investor is doing. If they're wanting to buy and hold it for long term, they're normally just wanting the pool to be not turning green. It's a very simple request is, hey, just keep this from turning green. I'm not going to be there. Nobody's using it. So whatever you got to do, make sure it stays in that point. The other type of investor is the ones who are wanting to rent it out like via vacation rental by owner, Airbnb, and the like. And theirs are going to see a lot of heavy use because they expect people to be in there every single week, using the pool, enjoying it to the best of their abilities for short periods of time. And both of those are actually very different than when you get from a regular homeowner. I find a lot of the homeowners are looking for maybe once a week, if not only a couple of times a month, to specifically get in their pool or work it into their daily life somehow. It's not the center focal point of what their house is for. They're actually there to live. Whereas with the long-term investor, might not see any pool use, and the vacation rental, the Airbnb, actually just has so much use because they're only there for a short period. Maybe it's only the weekend, a couple of days. So they're in the pool hours on end every day, and every day that they're there. So you'll see in those that the chemicals are going to be slightly different. On a homeowner, you'll see a very consistency over a long period of time. They'll fit their swimming into a schedule for whatever it is. They may see higher in the summer if they've got kids in school that are out for summer vacation or something like that. But with a vacation rental or an Airbnb, because of the high use, it's normally going to require more chemicals to keep it from having any algae or anything like that growing, just because anything that gets in the pool takes chemicals out with it when it gets out.
So let me ask you this then. Some of your short-term investor clients, do they notice a higher demand on their properties that have pools versus properties that don't?
So with pools that in Arizona, rentals, especially with heaters, are year-round. And so if you're looking for the short-term investor who's looking to, just be able to recoup whatever their cost is to have that place until they can turn around, flip it, sell it or whatever, they want to be making as much profit as possible. So I actually see that they're looking to rent that out as often as possible. You may only have, 12 hours, if not a day, that it's down compared to someone who's looking for something more long-term than that.
For maintenance, that probably creates some issues with being able to get in and quickly and do stuff.
Yeah, because then you have to schedule it around the downtime for the pool or create that downtime with the renters understanding that this pool is going to be down for 24, 48 hours while we're working on this to get it back up for you.
Yeah, and I would imagine in the short term, and maybe I'm wrong here, but my perception is you'd probably have a greater amount of abuse and breakage on short-term rental pools versus the homeowner who's kind of gotten the system down and uses it on a regular basis.
Yeah, the short term, like I said, because it's in use just so heavily, that's more wear and tear on the equipment, which is already sitting out 9 times out of 10 in our Arizona sun, which that is also a harsh part of it as well. So you have to worry about more stuff getting into the pool, creating more issues that could drag along the bottom to create any scuff, wear and tear on the bottom of the pool, such as if somebody decides to have a party there. Now you got to worry about the cleanup. I've actually had glass broken into a pool before, and then you had to shut it down until you could get all that out.
Yeah, that's not a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you also have worked on homes for fix and flip investors. What risks and rewards do you see in a home that's being flipped that has a pool versus not having a pool?
So on those, you're typically looking to get just everything up to snuff so they can be sold. Any gaskets, O-rings, any of the stuff that you can normally put off if you already own this home, we're planning to keep it for a long time, you wouldn't have to worry about these, being repaired right away. But when you're looking to, flip this, you want to make sure that these are all going to pass muster when the inspection comes by. And those inspectors are going to look at everything they can to see what could possibly be coming up for the new owner in the short term. So in those situations, anything that might have a slight drip leak or something like that in any of the plumbing needs to be repaired. Any pump that's not running properly, making any noise or anything like that, which a normal homeowner might be fine with, a little bit of excess noise. But for somebody who's wanting to purchase it, they want to know that it's not going to break in the next 3 weeks, So you'll see a lot more of those things get fixed with someone who's looking to flip the house or sell it in the short term. They want to make sure that everything's going to run properly. They want to make sure that the aerator's going, that the waterfall's going. If it has a slide, it does a slide work.
Right.
So they want to make sure that everything is already fixed, ready to go, so that they can show this off in its best case scenario. And that, of course, can increase what you're having to invest in the backyard in those situations.
So for a fix and flip investor, so he's going to buy this home, he's going to remodel the house, and obviously going to have to deal with the pool. What kind of risks arise, or what kind of issues arise if the pool's been sitting empty for a month, 6 months, a year, when the investor gets the opportunity to purchase this home?
Yeah, for how long it's been sitting empty is really going to depend on what time of the year it was empty as well. In the winter here, a month down, you could theoretically just clean it up, get some water back in there, and you won't have any issues. A month empty in the summer here is very likely that it's going to be having some issues. More wear and tear on the surface that could lead to cracks, long-term leakage, and the like. And you may even, just from 1 month being down, may have to do an entire resurface to actually get it before you can refill it with water and then be able to even sell the place, because they're going to want it probably full.
Is there any difference, I guess, with that issue with a plaster versus a pebble tech versus a rubber lined type pool that sits empty in the summer versus winter and that kind of thing?
So I don't have a ton of experience with the rubber line, but the one I did, they let theirs be empty for about 3 weeks in the spring. And before summer was over, it was already showing a lot of signs of wear and tear that you wouldn't expect from that. So they were already looking at replacing their rubber line. The pebble tech and the plaster, those will last for years and years as long as you keep them properly maintained. And I don't see a huge difference, especially in the newer installations of plaster and pebble tech. For years after they've been installed, they'll both be functioning perfectly fine. And those, like I mentioned earlier, if it's in the winter when you're having those empty, it's not going to be affected nearly as much in the summer, just because we have a lot less sunshine, a lot less heat in the winters here.
Somebody told me that you should be aware when you see a pool where they did pebble tech outside of the water line. So if they've come up with over the edges around the lips and those kind of things with pebble tech, is that an issue that you run into or you see with pools?
Yeah, so those rolled edges is typically how I referred to them, of that pebble tech. It comes straight out of the water, rolls over the edge of the pool, instead of having the tile that goes all the way around with an actual cool deck that it goes up to. That rolled pebble tech sits outside of the water at all times. So imagine having your pool empty all the time. That's the type of abuse
Oh,
that
yeah.
pebble tech is taking. It's constantly dry, it's constantly being berated by the elements, and it doesn't have any of the additional help from the water keeping it hydrated. That it will find that pebble tech on those rolled edges over time are going to crack. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And so a lot of times when I see that happen, my normal recommendation is get a contractor who's going to go around, line the top part with that tile, because the tile you can clean and get a lot of the calcium deposits off of it, which you'll see that ring where that water
Right.
sits on that pebble tech. The pebble tech surface is not nearly as kind to getting that calcium off. And so when you put the tile there, that tile is much easier for scrubbing. You can do it
Oh,
yourself.
so for maintenance, it makes
Yeah.
it much better.
Yeah, because you can get pumice stones from any of your local pool stores, and you can go actually rub off that calcium hardness to get rid of that pool line on a tile surface.
Right.
When you have that rolled pebble tech, you're not going to be able to do that same thing.
Well, I think these things are important because obviously, if you get into a situation where you find some of the things you're talking about, a pool that's been empty for a long time and it has to be resurfaced, it not only can add significant amount of money to a fix and flip investor's project, but it can also add a lot of time. And we all know that time is money. But what about the rewards? For having a pool and going ahead as an investor, having a pool and redoing it. What do you see as the biggest rewards when they get ready to sell that?
When they're getting ready to sell it, they're going to be able to market it with that pool, and they'll be able to show off all of the features that it has. Does it have a diving board? Is it a diving pool? Is it one that's going to be good for swimming laps in? Is it going to be a play pool where you can go out there and just relax in the warmer weather? Is it something that's going to be more suited for kids playing in, where it's in the shorter levels of water instead of the 9-foot deep diving pool? So those are going to attract different buyers just depending on what the pool actually is and what features it has as well. As I mentioned earlier, some people like to listen to water running in the backyard, so they like to have their waterfall on. They
Right.
like to have the aerator on. And those additions can be very useful in helping to sell that pool.
What about, have you ever had somebody come to you and just go, man, I'm tired of the maintenance. I'm tired of the money. I'm tired of the investment in the pool. And talk to you about filling a pool in.
Yeah, I've had multiple clients that have talked about that over the years. And the simplest solution that I see a lot of them go with is actually draining it, having a contractor come out and build a deck over the back of the pool so that the pool is still there. So they can still sell the house with the pool addition. It just has a deck built over it so that it can still become a pool in the future, even though they don't want to use it anymore. Because they're at the point where they don't want to pay for the electricity for the pump to run. They don't want to pay for the water that evaporates out.
Kids moved out of the house. They're not using the pool anymore.
Kids moved out of the house. I see this sometimes with first-time home buyers that they bought the house. They were wanting to have it for their teenagers to swim in. But teenagers typically will respond, well, I want to go swim in my friend's pool, not my pool. They want to go swim at their friend's house. Whereas before teenagers, a lot of times those younger children will love swimming in their own pool. They'll want to be in there with their parents and spend time in those pools. So just the age range on who's looking at this as well, from the buyer's perspective, will change on who's looking for it.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so last question. Recently, you had me coach you through getting started in real estate investing.
Yeah, not too long ago, I used your system and you helped me close on my first home, and it was a no money down closing as well.
What I need to do is I need to get you back so you can share your experience with the audience and you tell people how the journey went and how it's going. So do you think you may be able to make that happen?
Yes, anytime. I would be glad to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. We're out of time today, but you've been listening to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. That's all the time we have for this episode with ASW Pool Service. I want to thank you for taking time to listen. And if you found this episode of Real Estate Profits with Pools helpful, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can always find the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. This is Scott Whitwam. Be sure to join me on the next episode of the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast, where we're wealth building through real estate.